What is going on, everybody? Happy Thanksgiving. Whenever you watch this, me and Sheets are recording here on Wednesday, getting ready for Thanksgiving and getting ready for a nice little 3-game slate. I know it's not as good as some of the slates we've had in the past. There's some complaints, but I actually really like this slate, and I've built a bunch of lineups. I've got a lot of ideas. Sheets, what are your thoughts on this slate and any Thanksgiving plans that we should know about?
What's wrong with the slate?
I like it. I just think that, sometimes we get a little bit better games on Thanksgiving. And this is not going to be the high-powered offenses that we've seen before. The Cowboys usually give up and score a bunch of points. Maybe they will in this game, but not
I
the
don't
best
know about that. I mean, I think that every year you get Detroit at home, and interestingly, this year that's going to be the highest total game.
Right.
You always get Dallas at home, but only in the last year or two have they been a high-scoring team.
That's
so it's
fair
not,
enough. That's fair enough. Yeah.
And the evening game, you got one of the top two teams in the AFC. The other one, I don't know what the hell's going on with them, but they are half their team has COVID, I guess. Also, not to make it even better, but yeah. So just so you know, I mean, so my process at this point, the first thing I looked at on Monday was I just found that it was just literally the easiest slate in the world, and they do that on purpose. Right, on Thanksgiving,
right,
you could play literally whoever you want. And then I was saying to myself, let's just see how ownership kind of plays into this. Just because you can play whoever you want doesn't mean you want to play whoever you want. So over the course of the last couple of days, now there's a couple of guys that we still have to talk about, but I felt as though while the Houston side of the ball and the game projected just the best, and it was so easy to get them all in. As not surprisingly, they're getting flooded with ownership. So I think that you can. My idea going into today, and I did a little of this before talking to you, is to find different ways to pivot and just to not necessarily have to eat that chalk. It's only a 3-game slate, so it's not as random as a showdown, but not as frothy, not as full as a full game slate. And I think that there are good values on a lot of other games. But before we get into that, do we have any status on Deandre Swift for openers?
I think we're assuming that he's probably most likely to play.
Okay.
But I don't know that we can necessarily, and look, assuming he plays, he's going to be incredibly popular, and I think he's a good play. Obviously, we can just get that, And if he's not, then we have some decisions to make. Do you want to take this game by game and go from there?
Yeah, sure. And we're going to get to I guess we're not going to get to it. You said to give the overview. So right now, we'll get back to it. Is my favorite, considering everything about, ownership, my probably favorite side of all these is probably the Dallas side of the Dallas game.
Yep.
Specifically the receiving guys. Just factoring everything in, but we'll get back to it. Let me get my screen up. Sorry.
No, yeah, pull it up. No problem. I actually would sort of echo the same sentiment a little bit here. The only thing I say, there's one other side I like better that's going to be low owned, and I like the Baltimore side of this. And I know that sounds really weird because the Baltimore side is really just 2 players that I like, but I think you're going to get bizarrely low on a 3-game slate ownership on Lamar Jackson. We all understand why, because we're going to get into it in the first game, but obviously Deshaun Watson stands out as being the clearly better play based on what's happened this year, the matchup, all that, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's a path where Jackson, look, he can break free against this Pittsburgh team. If they're going to try and blitz him, he has the ability to open it up with his legs. If he gets what breaks one play with his legs, that'll take his lousy 20-point per game performances up to 27, 28. Maybe even a little higher. I think it's very, very, very possible. I would say even likely that he ends up as the highest scoring quarterback on the slate. So that's maybe one of the major contrarian things. He'll be in more than half my lineups probably.
Well, what's going to be interesting is that I guess we could talk about for a second when we get to it. Is one of my key X outs, right? Is maybe Mark Andrews. So it's going to be but you can do it, right? I mean, you can play. You can do both. You could play Andrews with somebody other than Lamar with somebody other than Andrews if you even need anybody to play along with Lamar, right?
Right.
And do that also. But let's talk about the Houston-Detroit game. Again, this is not particularly earth-shaking, but Deshaun Watson projects to be a really good play. Both receivers, Fuller and Cooks present to be really good plays. So you could certainly make a Houston double stack lineup if you want, like, 90%, not 90%, but like a huge percentage of the people. And then what I've heard is other ways you can get access to Houston, like maybe going with Kiki QT. I don't know if Randall Cobb is in or just.
No, he's out. They announced today that for sure the Cobbs and Stills are out.
Okay. So you can go with Kiki QT if you want to do that. And then there's the Duke Johnson thing. What's interesting about Duke Johnson is that, if you look at the running backs on the slate, I mean, you can honestly look. Zeke is the best. Look, I presume Zeke is the best play, but aside from that, I mean, you could make cases to and from a lot of these guys. So, and we'll get to some of them in a minute. But yeah, sure, you could play Duke Johnson. It would be obviously quite the great troll for him to just bust every freaking week as chalk, and then God forbid they ignore him just a little bit for him to go off here. But I don't know.
No, he's going to be massively owned.
Okay, I just don't think this is the environment for him to go off. And if you want to know the truth, I think that Watson is, I don't think he likes to throw it to the backs. I think he likes to scramble himself or heave it downfield. I just don't think that Duke is almost even playable in this system. I don't know.
I hear what you're saying. The only thing I just want to counter with is this is Detroit.
What's so bad about Detroit? I mean, they were terrible last week, but
they're the worst. They're the second worst run defense in football.
Oh, really?
And they're pretty awful against the pass as well. They also got beaten down so badly last week. Now, if we want to just throw out last week and almost treat it like Detroit had a bye, because that's sort of what it felt like. If you get a performance like that, Duke Johnson becomes a fantastic play. Watson becomes an incredible fade, as do all the receivers. That's the route you're playing if you're going to play the other side. That side of the angle, the blowout angle, and then maybe one of the Detroit guys catching passes and trying to catch up. But I'm iffy on this one. I want to play a little bit of that angle and spend my money elsewhere because I think the passing game and Duke Johnson is going to be incredibly popular here. But I just feel like it's going to be hard not to have pieces. Watson I'll use whatever lineups I'm using. As of right now, I've only got 3 quarterbacks. Watson, I'm going to have in about 30+% of my lineups. I know I'll probably be with the field, I know I'll be behind the field a little bit, probably because he'll be 50% owned. And Stafford's my other one. So I'm trying to attack this game. Even though I like the Dallas-Washington game a lot, I actually think that I'm going to be ignoring both quarterbacks. These guys can throw the ball, for 300 yards and throw 0 touchdowns, and it's not going to do, or 1 touchdown. But I'll take the receivers who are getting, 15 targets each or something like that, which is totally possible in this game.
Speaking of receivers getting 15 targets, do we think Galladay's playing or no?
As of right now, we're assuming that he's not, okay, so let's get into that because Marvin Jones, me and Marvin Jones, I'm going to play Marvin Jones on Thanksgiving. It's just a rite of passage here, but usually he's the low-owned guy because he's the second receiver. I like Marvin Jones, but I think the sneakiest play in this one is, well, I don't know sneaky because there's a few good low options. Kiki Cutie is going to get more traction than he's got right now, but I think Marvin Hall is the better play. Amendola, obviously Amendola's status is a huge question here, and we've sort of got him like as 50-50. I don't know.
Why is he such a big deal? For himself or for others?
For Marvin Hall and for Marvin Jones.
Okay.
For both the Marvins. He was out last week. I actually think he might be out. But I mean, assuming that he plays, he's in play at 3.7, extremely in play. I like this. I like the Detroit side of the receiving side of this. I like the other side of it too. But you're going to get 50% owned Fuller, 50% owned Cooks, and 40% owned Jones probably. So I'm looking for Marvin Hall and QT and Amendola if he plays as my pivots off those guys.
Okay. I think Detroit's going to play a little better. That's my.
I agree with you. My feeling is that was I want to treat it a little bit like an outlier. But this team is really weird. I don't have a lot of faith in them. But, one guy we haven't talked about yet, and he's going to be the second most popular tight end is in this game. And well, you actually are going to have a couple tight ends owned a little bit in this game. Hawkinson is going to be, if you're not playing Andrews, most people are going to play Hawkinson. Jordan Akins is the other guy they're going to pay down for. And then I think you're going to have a little bit of Schultz, right?
Yeah.
So I don't mind any of this stuff. I just think that the Akins thing, I don't feel great about it. I think I'd rather just spend up for Hawkinson personally. I don't find myself paying down at tight end very much this week.
I mean, I really believe that if Galladay is out, I would if Hawkinson is really lower owned than well, he's going to be than Andrews. I think Hawkinson's a much better play if Galladay is in fact out. I mean, they have just. I mean, they have more been, especially if Amendola's out too. I mean, like, right. So I'm got to keep an eye on all that, but I actually prefer him at lower ownership to Andrews than Andrews, even though, I mean, like, it's kind of silly to say, right, as Andrews is clearly, Lamar's best number one target, right? I mean, that's just where I'm at right now.
One thing to keep an eye on is that either Galladay or this is a big game for the Lions, and the way they got smoked, there's a little pride factor. You'd think that they probably would try to at least activate one of those guys to maybe at least get him on the field for a few plays I'm not even saying a decoy, just to get your regular offense back out there, to give yourself a little bit of enthusiasm. So maybe they'll play a little hurt, but be limited. So I'm not, even if those guys play, I just want to say this, just treat it with a little bit of caution, because they might not get full reps. They might just want to get their offense going.
What about the other running backs? Like if Swift doesn't play, I mean, are we presuming he's playing? So if he's playing, he's a good play, I guess.
Yeah. But
I don't know. There's no universe where I like, not to say I have to, but there's no universe I'd play Swift over Elliott. I'm just not doing it.
Oh yeah, you could play them both together very easily, though.
Right. But if he doesn't play, would you take a shot at Kerryon Johnson or Adrian Peterson?
It'd be Adrian Peterson for me, and I actually wouldn't mind him at all. I don't think the ownership would spike through the roof or anything, so I think that you're going to get him at low ownership. It was all game flow, which is why Kerryon got more of the snaps last week, because they were down so much in the second half and they weren't running the ball. So that's why Kerryon got a little bit more work. I think Peterson, if Detroit if it's a back and forth game with Houston, I think that they're going to see, if there's no Swift, you're going to see Peterson on the field a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. And, last week when they announced Swift was out or whatever, Peterson actually got a little bit chalky and busted a lot of people. But like you said, I mean, it was 20-0 and he never had a chance. So, there's a tough game log to roster a guy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So if in fact Swift is out, because I'm not in love with any running back, honestly, on this slate, except I don't say even in love with. I mean, there's Elliott, and then there's just a whole bunch of other
question marks.
Guys with question marks, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So one really weird wild card play, if you're playing this game in showdown slate and you don't play this in regular, is CJ Procise.
Oh, look at that. Okay.
So, the backup running back for Duke, he's been getting some work in there. They will bring him in occasionally on third downs. There's a chance he could even get a goal line carry potentially. But, I mean, again, you don't want to go crazy with it, but he would be the guy who would stand out as like a weird off-the-board play in this showdown to me. But, I mean, I like all these guys. I'm just going to be a little bit below the field on the Houston passing game, and it's strictly due to ownership. And I can see the game flow going where, all we have to do is look at last week. If it turns into a blowout like that, you're not going to get paid off from these Houston guys, in my opinion. So I think I'm just going to try and be a little bit below the field, but I will still have exposure. And I'm going to be ahead of the field on the most of the Lions guys, especially assuming if Amendola is out. I also do like both of these defenses a little bit. I especially like the Lions defense because they're cheap, and they're actually not projected to be that high owned right now because it's pretty easy to get whatever you want. So I kind of like going off the board and just taking the unknown defense. I prefer Dallas's defense over Houston's, but I think Houston will be a little bit lower owned than Dallas. And
I literally like all 6 defenses equal. I mean, I could play.
Well, there you go. And then you play the low owned guys we just mentioned.
Yeah. Either the low-owned ones or the cheapest one that makes your lineup fit. I mean, either way.
Yeah, you really just don't need that much cheapness, but I hear you.
Right.
All right, you ready to move on?
Yeah, so Washington, Dallas. So I'm going to keep my streak, hopefully my streak or whatever, my sports betting pick streak going, because people are going to ask who I like in Thanksgiving. And for those of you who've been following along, it's going to come as no surprise who I like this weekend. So Dallas last week looked a lot better, right? Dalton finally looked better. They were healthy. They beat Minnesota on the road as an underdog. Washington with Alex Smith is just like, looks like they're just nowhere. So, of course, I like the Redskins. I mean, Dallas only favored by 3. Who in their right mind, honestly, is not taking Dallas? I mean, like, what do you need to know? I mean, you saw them finally.
I don't know
this
about
is just my logic.
Okay.
They're waking up. You know, they see they beat Minnesota, and now they're at home only laying 3 on Thanksgiving. I'm going to sit there off my ass and not bet Dallas. It just seems like just such an easy play to take the Redskins. So that's my pick for the Thursday. I'm taking Alex Smith and the Redskins. With that said, my shell lineup here is basically a Dallas onslaught. So let's reconcile that. But that's my spread pick for the week, and I have literally no reason to imagine this ever wins. But that's just the way I pick them. So I like Washington against the spread.
Well, that's a really interesting. I think it's a fine take. I don't see these teams as being hardly different at all. I think the Washington defense is I prefer even over the Dallas defense. I like both the defenses in this game. I like like you said, all the defenses are in play. So you could just go with the lowest owned ones. But I do think it's interesting because if you're going to take the Washington side of this and you think Washington's going to win this game, or even if you just think it's going to be mostly just back and forth, where they're not in a bunch of we need to throw the ball situations, then I think you would want to play Gibson.
Yep.
The problem is I can't resist the temptation to play a low-owned McKissick with that high of a target upside, I should say. You know what I mean? Like if they do get down in this game like they were the previous weeks, before they beat Cincinnati, like they were to the Giants and in Detroit. If Dallas can get ahead in this game, you might see McKissick out there getting his 14, 15 targets. And that sounds crazy. That's what he got the other 2 games.
Well, and this is how you correlate lineups, right? Like, so you look at this lineup that I put here just kind of as an example, right? I have all kinds of Dallas stuff, right?
Yep.
Dalton, Zeke, Cooper, Lamb, right? Total whatever. And even threw the Dallas defense in there also. Mm-hmm. So let's throw McKissick in because he's certainly going to be the one that's going to be benefiting from this. And you'll see who I did not put into this build, which I think is going to be again the too easy way to do it. Run back with McLaurin, right? Yeah. So I feel, and this leaves 1,300 on the table. You know what I mean? This is the kind of funniness that I kind of like. But I totally agree with you. I think that if you're gonna can build your lineup, set groups or whatever, that McKissick certainly goes more along with Dallas having the lead. And like I said, that second running back position to me is no big deal. I'm not as just kind of like, ooh, I have to play Deandre Swift as everybody else. For me, it's Elliott and then like a second guy. So may as well make a McKissick, who might be certainly lower owned than Duke Johnson, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, McKissick's should be I think pretty low owned actually.
Yeah.
I like McKissick a lot here. I think him and Antonio Gibson are. Again, depending on game flow, not a virtual coin flip, but close enough to it. I'll take the side of McKissick. Although I like Gibson a lot here. I just think that if you can play the Dallas gets ahead and you can get McKissick back out there, I love the ceiling, especially at the ownership that he's going to be low owned. People are just going to have money to spend, so they're going to spend up. That's the way it is, and. We don't know for sure about Dontrell Inman yet. We haven't got that word whether he's playing. I know it doesn't sound like a big thing. McLaurin is going to be pretty popular. I'm going to have some of it, but again, I'll be below the field on McLaurin. Yep. I'll probably be ahead of the field on Cooper. I'll definitely be ahead of the field on CeeDee Lamb, and I'll be way ahead of the field on Michael Gallup.
Yep.
If you want to do something funny though, Gallup, is not going to be too funny. He's going to probably have 10% ownership or so. Steven Sims would be the other play if Inman's out for Washington. He would be the other guy I would look to. Sort of runs those intermediate routes. Smith is already, he's had 9 targets and a touchdown over the past 2 games. I would consider him as an off-the-board play on a 3-game slate. But again, there's a lot of value, so I don't know if he gets there. You might need to suck it up and just do it in a giant field tournament. But I do think if Inman's out, he makes sense as a long shot play.
And obviously Logan Thomas is in play, just because there are only 6 tight ends, and he's not the worst. So
I just prefer I guess I genuinely prefer Ebron versus Thomas and Schultz, and a lot of it I think he's going to be the lowest owned of those guys. But I also kind of like I don't usually love to take tight ends against either Pittsburgh or Baltimore, but I think that Ebron at low ownership, and he's had he's been getting pretty consistent looks, and they've been throwing the ball a ton. So I think I might edge a little bit more with him over these guys. But Schultz certainly would be my preferred guy over Thomas. I'm tired of Thomas's attention, but not actual
Right.
significant enough production. And it's just really bothered me all year long. I feel like he's been a huge gaping hole in lineups that could have done something this year for me. And it's not just recency bias. I mean, look at his numbers. He doesn't ever get there. And not say that this isn't the right matchup and all that, but I just prefer the other tight ends.
You know who's pretty good, by the way?
Who's that?
Tony Pollard's pretty good.
You know, it's interesting. I was thinking about him as an off-the-board play. I just don't know if I can do it over the other guy in the next game.
I got you. I'm not even know if he's a good play. I'm just saying he's pretty good.
Yeah, and the thing is weird is that I truly feel like if this was being played 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, that he might have had some decent ownership because he was starting to trend in the right direction in terms of his usage for Dallas. But no one's going to play him now. So you can take a shot in a giant field GPP. I
mean, the Giants, they're without Barkley. I mean, they could use freaking Pollard instead of Wayne Gallman. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I know. Gallman, though, you look, that guy drives me nuts, man. Every time I've played him, he's put up 6 fantasy points or 4 or something like that. And then the times when I don't play him at minimum cost, he ends up, he runs it for 2 touchdowns and 5 yards or something. All right, you ready to move on to the final?
Yeah.
All right.
So, I mean, all the Pittsburgh receivers, right? I mean, this is like my friend Jackie said, this is like wide receiver university, man. They're all so good.
Yep.
I mean, they're all great. I don't know, man. Baltimore has put up 2 pretty bad games in a row. I shouldn't say the game against Tennessee was bad, but it was pretty bad. And the game against New England was an embarrassment. I mean, it was in the rain and all this stuff.
That was terrible, though. The weather storm and everything. That was a little.
It was a disaster. I know, but they honestly have not put up a good game in a while.
Offensively, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't help being out a couple of dudes. But the thing is that.
Did I lose you there? Oh, we got a little frozen here.
It's just not really what they I don't know. I think that Gus Edwards, for what they ask of the running backs, is going to be enough. I don't know. Let's see if Lamar can get something going. I kind of agree with you. I think that that at, say, he's at 6,800 and Watson at 6,400. I mean, I think Lamar, I mean, he could, I think he can have a really big game. You know what I mean? And we talk about this every week with this rushing upside. And, you give the guy only one running back to play with and put him in a desperate situation. Pittsburgh can bring a little heat. He's gonna be moving, man. I mean, he's gonna be moving. So when you got Lamar moving, you have a ceiling. That's basically the idea.
And they did a great job with Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh did it in real football in the last game against Lamar by really containing him. But I just want to point out, he had his most rushes of the season. He had 16 carries in that game. And if you see that again, the odds of him just breaking one of those plays is so high, so much high enough. And, let's say he breaks a 50-yard touchdown run. And then he ends up, likely he ends up with 100 yards rushing then. You hit the touchdown right there. And boom, before you even talk about passing the ball, you're already almost at 20 points. Let's go. You know what I mean? So I just see the path for this, and that I can't resist it. And the ownership, if you could say that Lamar Jackson on this kind of a slate without even another running quarterback on the slate, and he's going to be, 15% owned. This game played 2-3 weeks ago before even the Lamar stuff started getting too bad. I think you see Lamar at like 60% ownership, 50% ownership on this slate. I really do.
What do you do with
Well, maybe not 50, maybe like 40-50. Sorry about that.
What do you do with James Conner?
Yeah, it's really weird because Pittsburgh has been playing to what the defense has been trying to stop them from doing. So they just keep throwing the ball when they're up. It's almost weird. They almost throw the ball more when they're up. You know what I mean? It's like an opposite type of thing that they're doing. They're not running with the lead because the other team's stacking against the run. They're like, okay, well, we can just get Big Ben to sort of do these extended run plays and throw these little 5-yard slants that may turn into something with his 3 stud receivers. And more often than not, they seem to. So I think we have to play a little tiny bit of Connor. I'm really annoyed about Benny Snell just vulturing the touchdown last week because it cast me at least the cash line in a lot of lineups. But I think James Conner is fine. I think that none of these, like you said, none of these running backs are too high to get excited about. The guys who I've got as preferred plays are strictly ownership based. But I like the idea of trying to go down with Edwards and McKissick a little bit, and I also like the idea of trying to play Connor instead more than Duke Johnson because I think he's going to be lower owned. But again, I don't have a really strong I love James Conner take. I would rather stick with the passing side of this. And the cool part about this is because the other games are actually pretty good for loaded with receivers. I think that you're going to get lower ownership on all the Pittsburgh guys. So I think I may have a rule. Now there might be one lineup that sneaks through, but I might have a rule where I try to get at least one Pittsburgh receiver in every lineup.
I like that. I mean, Pittsburgh, right? Man, they're really good. We talked about this ad nauseum the other day.
Right.
I mean, Ben just slinging the ball, and he's got. Look, I'm not saying any of these guys are better than Antonio Brown, but crap. I mean, Antonio Brown out, and let's say all three of those guys. I mean, those are three really good receivers, man. And who'd have thought that I don't want to say the worst of them, but the least of the opponent's worries is now Juju Smith-Schuster, you know, and he's awesome. You know what I mean? So, so you got three legit freaking dudes there. Honestly, I wouldn't know why they would run the ball. I mean, you know what I mean? Like until they stop that. So
it's funny because what I would say is too, the Pittsburgh stacks have kind of been unlucky this year because it's been so strangely divided between the receivers that it hasn't given one of them the 35-point game. Although they had, I mean, look, we got 42 out of Claypool. One, there's been a couple of exceptions, and Deontay put up a big one last week. But these games could be even so much bigger. They're just spreading it around so much. And one of these times, that's going to end up being more one guy. Last week it was Deontay actually. And pretty much every week you're getting 20 plus out of at least one of these guys. So I just think playing at least one of them. And by the way, you could even build a Lamar lineup with Andrews or anybody else and play two of these guys without playing Roethlisberger.
Oh, I was going to play, Lamar by himself with
there you
two
go.
of those guys.
I love that. I think that's really, really, really creative. And I think that's an interesting way to go. I just happen to like Andrews. I don't like taking tight ends against Pittsburgh, but Andrews is a significantly better tight end to me than everybody on the slate, except for Hawkinson. You could argue with the injuries if Detroit still is missing.
And if you want to play some somebody in Showdown or whatever, if you're really on tilt, you can play the other guy from Pittsburgh, right? The 3K guy.
Yeah, I mean, well, you could always do that with James Washington, Ray McLeod, probably be Washington for me. But I would rather go on with Des Bryant as a speculation guy on the other side.
Okay. Well, what about? Excuse me. What about this? Let's talk about this for a second.
Yeah, let's talk about it for a second.
Well, why?
I mean, okay, it's possible, man. It's very strange to me. I would say that it's weird to me because Marquise Brown at 4,300 had 23%. He played 23% of the snaps last week in a tight back and forth game.
Okay.
That's worrisome. So that's good for Des Bryant.
Right.
And it could be him. It could also be just as likely be Willie Snead, who put up 23, against New England in that ugly game.
I got to use this. You have to use Des Bryant, no?
He's got a big enough body. They should look for him near the goal line. I mean, I can make that argument. Why not? Why not throw a little Des in? There's other good guys. Like Des Bryant feels so gross to play to me over Gallup, but
yeah, but I feel better playing him than freaking Willie Snead. No, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody's going to play Willie Snead either, but Willie Snead at least has put up 20 at some point this year. And
I don't know. Des had a really big catch near the end.
Yeah, no, he did. You're right.
And these guys' reputations precede them. They didn't. They and as long as he keeps showing that he's not totally washed, they're gonna throw him. Dude, he had 4 receptions and 5 targets. I don't know.
Yeah, and by the way, just a real quick side tangent about Lamar. When everybody talks about all these other guys, oh look, they always use that as a decision for they always use it as a argument for Wentz. Well, look at the receivers he has. First of all, he had the 2 best receiving tight ends in football for a while, or 2 of the best 2-man combo at tight end. Excuse me, not the best 2 tight ends, but the 2 best 2-man combo. And you look at these guys over here. Who the hell does Lamar have to throw the ball to?
Nobody.
Sorry, but Des Bryant can't make the roster on any other team. Willie Snead can't make the roster on most of these teams, and he's their number 2 receiver. Marquise Brown is your 1 receiver, and he's only playing 23% of the snaps because he's running the wrong routes. You've got DuVernay, who's a rookie. I mean, give Lamar, before everybody jumps on the Lamar sucks now bandwagon, why don't we get him some talent around him and see what he can do? And Marquise Brown, look, there's always a chance that flyer comes back and he finds his old self, but I mean these are really cause for concern for me with him. Like the 23% of the snaps in a tough game, and only having broken double digits in targets once this year, averaging 5 a game, almost 6 a game. That's just and literally with no big plays.
How do you play 20% of the snaps in a 54-point total overtime game?
I don't know.
Is that what you said? You said he wasn't running the routes. Is that what you said?
There was some rumor that it was some speculation, I should say, that people were saying that he wasn't running good routes and actually almost got Lamar picked one time, didn't fight enough for a ball that could have been picked off another time. This is just speculation from other touts that I've heard out there, but it is odd. It's definitely some reason for concern. Having said all of that, it won't matter if he shows up and it's one big play right off the bat. He's obviously not only going to play more snaps the rest of the game, he's already basically got you there. But I think mostly what you want to do is focus on the Pittsburgh receivers here, and then I think that some Edwards. And by the way, you know what, Sheets? I don't mind if you want to. I think you could play Lamar with Edwards. There's not that Edwards is a great pass catching back, because he's not, but there's still enough of a chance where he could get there with that. And he's only 4K. I mean, I don't see that as being bad and sort of just going for this game stack. You can it also leaves you room to make some adjustments later on if you get your early stuff right. You know what I mean? Because you have the late night hammer here. And just that, that's going to take me to my last point about this game. It's really important on Thanksgiving more than any other day of the year for football to late swap. And you can get a huge edge because they're going to have, you're talking about just such a small slate and all the games at different times. You can get a huge edge and just take a chance on a guy who's literally, like one of the Des Bryants who's going to have 2% ownership or 1% ownership. You know what I mean? You can make that pivot over from Michael Gallup to him. You can make the pivot over from QT, and a 2v2 with QT and not QT. You can't do that yet. I'm thinking of the Dallas. Gallup is the best example of that one actually. But you can also switch. Whether you want Amari Cooper or Juju or one of the Pittsburgh receivers, you can use that. You can use ownership as a deciding factor at the end. It's a really important slate to late adjust, late swap.
Well, I have another thing you could do. So we talked about this kind of Dallas construction, right, where you just Dallas onslaughted, and then you took the pass catching low-owned running back, you know what I mean, as part of that game script. Mm-hmm. You can do the same thing with Pittsburgh and take a wild flyer on Justice Hill at running back at 4K, being the quote-unquote pass-catching running back they had to bring up. So
interesting.
I don't know. Maybe that's reaching, but
it might be a reach for the main slate. But I think for a showdown, I think that's an interesting idea.
Well, it's definitely not a reach if I'm getting, if I'm a little behind going into that game.
That's true. That's true. You could that's I'm sorry. Yeah.
Even better. You could know, if you fade the Houston Detroit game, for example, and the Houston Detroit game starts to go off a little bit, then you all of a sudden need to zig. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's also that's an interesting dynamic to the slate. That's what makes Thanksgiving fun is that every game's an island game. So you have a chance to see what's going on and then adjust accordingly. And look, I don't know when your dinner's being served or whatever it is, but just you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes, man. You gotta have an understanding family. Listen, if you're about to sit down at 4:15 and you're like, dude, you gotta tell your whole family, I gotta swap off of CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup. I got to juice it up a little bit. They have to understand.
Yep, absolutely. They're going to have to understand. And, and the last point I want to make about this passing game for Pittsburgh, you could include Ebron as part of the must-have one of these guys kind of a things, and maybe use him in just 15%. He's going to be very, very low owned. And the truth is, this guy gets targets in the end zone every freaking week. He had 3 targets, I believe, in the end zone last week. He's had the touchdowns in 3 of the last 4 games. He gets over 6 targets a week. And honestly, about 25% of them are end zone targets or red zone targets, excuse me. So that's a guy who could catch 2 touchdowns and is going to have minuscule, nothing ownership compared to all the other tight ends. So I do really like the Pittsburgh side of this. I think this Baltimore-Pittsburgh game, my take on it, is I like the over in this game.
I agree with you, actually. I didn't quite make my pick to announce publicly, but that was my next lean, actually, was Baltimore-Pittsburgh over, just exactly like that. Because these games are funny, man. The Baltimore-Pittsburgh games, I've seen them go both ways. I've seen them be ugly when people expect them to be shootouts. I've seen them blow up when people expect them to be defensive struggles. So a little bit too much about how Lamar is kind of crappy, a little bit too much about Baltimore's COVID, a little bit too much about the absence of a running game, a little bit too much about Detroit's defense. So I'm with you, man. I could see lots of variations where this game goes like 35-30 or something like that.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. All right, well, so to cover it all, the favorite plays, I guess we can sort of sum up here, and that we want to get your hot take of the games and all that. Real quick, I'll just go I like my lower owned running backs would be Edwards and McKissick. I really like Gallup, Lamb, Cooper, and then the Pittsburgh receivers. I think they're going to be lower owned than the other guys in the Houston-Detroit game. I'll be ahead on Detroit, behind on Houston, behind on McLaurin, and behind on Gibson. Those are my major, not all the way fades, but those are the guys I'm furthest behind
on. I do like both onslaught ideas, Dallas and Pittsburgh. And again, the way to do it, this is my opinion, is that if you do it on the Dallas side, you don't run it back with the obvious McLaurin. You run it back some other way.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise at Pittsburgh, if you do run a Pittsburgh onslaught, you don't run it back with Andrews. What you do, I think, boy, how about this? What if you did, like you said, Connor, the receivers, the defense, and you let because then I kind of still want Lamar. So
right.
I guess that's my main take, is that I think Lamar, like you might think too, even though he might not be projected as well, I think that he has just as much upside as Deshaun Watson. That's the best way I can describe it.
I love that. And just thinking about one more thing is about the Lamar thing, like these short weeks, Thursday, this guy excels when he's forced into situations where he has to make things happen on the fly. He doesn't excel in these drop back passing, we've got time to plan for you type of things. It almost feels like an advantage for a guy like him. And everything breaks down and they got you caught in the backfield. Okay, that's your time. That's what I'm counting on in this game. I'm counting on him escaping that and hopefully breaking one play. And literally all he has to do is break one big play and he's probably going to get you home.
And listen, and if in fact, Detroit is really bad, okay, which is very possible. And if in fact Deandre Swift doesn't play, which is possible. And if in fact Galladay doesn't play, which is possible. And Detroit actually is horrible and Houston is actually not bad. You could end up with like a real chalky Houston build and the final score end up being 20-6 and you're not happy about it,
Right.
So it's you're going to be at a 20-6 score and then you're going to have to sweat all these other teams, which is, ain't going to be a lot of fun.
That's true.
So I don't necessarily think that you have to play the Houston side, even though they're going to look, I'm telling you, Bobby, I'm on top of this, is that they're going to show up in like just zillions of optimizers. They're going to be really, really popular.
100,000,000% agree with you.
So I'm totally look, and don't forget, as basketball season starts to approach, we start thinking about this again. Is when you have these later games, they afford you the flexibility to shift around, and it's still for whatever reason I still don't know why people just still play more the early games than the late games, whether it be in basketball slates or whatever. Football sometimes when you have obvious games, whatever they'll play them. But baseball, right? Basketball, those later games are always lower owned, and it doesn't make any sense, especially when you have late swap, because you're supposed to take the option that is more flexible. But hey, maybe you're right. Maybe the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game just is the one that decides it.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting strategy to try and stay a little bit more away from the first game, because I do think that's where everyone's going to go. And like you said, you have all kinds of flexibility. If it doesn't work out right, you're basically running away from most of the field. So That sounds pretty good. Sheets, what's your big take of the week in terms of the games? In terms of which game would you bet on here?
I'll take Washington plus the points.
Washington plus the points. All right, yeah, consistent with what you said before.
And completely inconsistent with all the money I'm going to be putting on fantasy this week.
No, but the thing is, you're going to be playing the Dallas passing game. That does mean you think Washington's going to win the game. You know what I mean? And
okay, there you go.
That's the way I look at it these days with receivers. It's a PPR world. Look at the other night. I know that the Cousins had a couple good games, but if you look at the Thielen-Jefferson combination numbers together, you would think the quarterback threw for 500 yards and 5 touchdowns.
Now that's something that no one's doing. Okay, so wait, so hold on. So now you want to do something else? Yeah. So if I want to put my money where my mouth is, right? So we'll go Alex Smith. We'll go Antonio Gibson. We'll go because if they win, he's going to get it. We'll put McLaurin in just for sake, and then we'll put in Washington defense, and then we'll run it back with give me one receiver. I'm not do Elliott. We're gonna go like CD Lamb.
You need to get too much more creative. Yeah, Lamb is the lower owned one. There you go.
And there you go. And then play whatever you want.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. If that comes through for you, I actually think you could even argue that you could do that same thing with McKissick, even though you like it more on the comeback side, and then you would want to play Zeke. That's the same, it's a flipping the script kind of a thing that they're playing.
Right.
But both ways, if I was going to go with it, and I think I might even just try one. I don't think I can do the Alex Smith thing, but maybe I'll throw it in a $3 tournament or something. But I'll try Alex Smith with one of Gibson, and then one with Gibson, and then one with.
Well, the beauty of it also is you could just go play Lamar. You'd probably make this work too. It's like.
Yeah, there you go. Why not? That looks a little bit more like my lineups.
Okay, very good.
Except for I'm a little lower on McLaurin. Yeah, and I just want to say that the McLaurin thing, well, I think he's going to have a good game most of the time here. I'm not as afraid of fading him as I would have been before because Alex Smith really doesn't chuck the ball downfield. And even if McLaurin, it would take him getting in twice and getting his 10 targets for whatever to really, really knock me out with all the receivers on this slate.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So, all right, Sheets. Anything else for the people before we get out of here?
No, but I'm warning you guys. Not warning you. Wait, what? The Steelers game was moved?
No way did that just happen. I don't even have that yet.
I just got it from Jack saying Steelers game moved. Hold on.
Oh, wow. This is going to find out in real time, guys. This is what football is like these days.
There it is. Moved to Sunday.
Oh, my God.
Tests.
Oh, my God.
Yep.
Well, I would suggest not.
Never mind. Never mind.
Oh, my goodness. What the hell with these timing of these things? This is ridiculous. All right. Well, it's going to be hard to get off the board on this slate. I still think the guys we talked about are in play. I just think we're going to have to play more of those.
Wait, who are the other guys? Let's take a look at this.
So the
7 players. Oh, these are all positives too. So Ingram was positive.
Yeah, Dobbins, we already knew that.
Positive. A quarterback, center. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
None of those players will be eligible to play Sunday. So why do they have to move it?
They might be eligible to play Sunday.
No, it says none of those players will be eligible to play Sunday.
I didn't read that part. Wow. Oh, I don't know. Wow.
This decision was made out of an abundance of caution to ensure the health and safety of all players.
Well, that's going to make it a lot less fun of an NFL.
Yeah, what the hell? I'm not happy about this at all.
Yeah. I think that.
And wait a minute. So hold on. Let's just hang on a second here. I bet you maybe they keep it on the same slate though.
All right. Well, that's an interesting point.
I don't know. Would they?
They couldn't do that.
No? But they can't put it on the main.
It's in the same week. They can't put it on the main. That's really weird. Well, I just want to say that, so let's just real quick, I guess come up a couple of things what we would do if we didn't have, that game. So the guys you'd really want to take some real gambles, and the guys
you'd want pretty much all your exposure in the Dallas game.
Yeah, and also you play guys like Marvin Hall, what I mean, for Detroit, and you can play
the other guy that you mentioned, right?
Steve Sims.
No, but there was another Procise.
But I don't know. I sort of like him as a cheap showdown thing. I don't know if I would go there.
Well, it's almost a showdown.
It's getting there. No, I know, but the price is not that cheap considering, you know what I mean? Like on a showdown slate, I think he's like a couple $100 or something versus 4K on this thing. But I'm looking down into my other plays. We'd be looking at some off the board plays that I would still like. It's hard to get that off the board with all these guys. So I still love Gallup. I think he's still not going to be too owned. I still love CeeDee Lamb, who will have ownership, but will be lower owned than the other. Marvin Hall. The good news is that game was at least not as targeted as this game was. Boy, oh boy. Wow. Maybe you play Darren Fells instead of as an off the board play at tight end instead of using Jordan Akins. Boy, there's not a whole lot to get way off the board without that. We're gonna have to see how ownership concentrates, but I really do think that there's a lot of you still have a lot of options, and I would just encourage you to get really, really as creative as possible. Maybe you double tight end it with the lower owned tight ends.
I'm still not 100% convinced that this gets removed from the slate.
Okay, well let's go with all the stuff we said, and then you really have some time to make some adjustments.
Well, we gotta check on Twitter and see if there's any talk about.
We don't know. It's gonna. I mean, they're not gonna announce that right away. We won't know for a few hours.
Well, Nick Saban tests positive.
I thought he already tested positive.
Yeah, I don't know. It's.
Oh man.
Yeah, I don't know. This is probably postponed to Sunday night. So one guy saying time to lower the salary cap to 45,000.
Yeah, maybe they can do some. No, they can't. I don't know what they can do. You know, Sheets, they could do what you said. People will hate it, but what else are they going to do? Because they can't. I guess they just make all the players ineligible and just cancel the game. Ugh. All right. Well, let's figure out what happens with that. And guys, any questions on Twitter? Any questions on here? I'll come back and answer for you. And once we get some more clarity on this, it's frustrating. I was excited about tomorrow's football slate.
Okay.
All right, Sheets. All right, man. Hey, good job, everybody out there. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And for Sheets, I'm Bobby saying we'll see you at the top of the leaderboards.